This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Despite the huge success of their first two albums, the Monkees were not a happy band. Although they enjoyed the trappings of fame, Mike and Peter especially were frustrated about being sidelined as musicians. So at the beginning of 1967, they issued Columbia Pictures with an ultimatum. Either we play on our next album, or we won't play at all. I'm Andrew from Parlogram, and welcome to the story of the Monkees' third album, Headquarters. At the beginning of 1967, the Monkees were the biggest pop band in the world. Eager to silence the critics and prove themselves as more than just actors in a TV show, they decided to take action. So when the idea arose that they would continue along the same path with the same team for their third album, they balked. Mike Nesmith was the most offended by this situation and walked out of a meeting at the Beverly Hills Hotel, but not before he'd punched a hole through the wall. The music coordinator for the Monkees project, Don Kirshner, thought Nesmith and, to a certain extent, Peter Tork had ideas above their station, in thinking they had more talent than they actually had. However, unwilling to jeopardize the project's success, Columbia Pictures agreed to the Monkees' request, and plans were set in motion for them to play all their own instruments on the next album. Nesmith had clashed fiercely with producer Jeff Barry on the previous album, so he instead recruited former Turtles member Chip Douglas to produce the new album. Recorded over 6 weeks of sessions at the RCA studios in Hollywood, Headquarters was the first album to feature the Monkees playing on every track. So now, let's go through this album track by track and discover the stories behind the songs. The album's opening track, You Told Me, is the first of 3 Mike Nesmith compositions on this album. The song opens with a count-in that may have been a nod to Taxman, the opening track on the Beatles' Revolver, but that's where the similarities end. Recorded at RCA Studio B in Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood on Friday, March 3rd, 1967, the track features Mike on 12-string electric guitar, Peter Tork on banjo, Davy Jones on tambourine, Mickey Dolenz on drums, and producer Chip Taylor on bass. Although no session tape survived, Take 15 became the master, to which Mike would add overdubs on March the 21st. The song is a typical well-crafted Nesmith composition with a folk rock country flavour. It's a terrific opening track and could easily have been a single release. The album's second track, I'll Spend My Life With You, was written by Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart, who'd also written the group's first single, Last Train to Clarksville. The track was first recorded in October 1966, but was passed over for release at that time. Tommy Boyce wrote this heartfelt song about a girl named Susan, who left him for a New York gangster. However, understanding the audience they were writing for, Bobby Hart helped tailor the lyrics into one of teenage romance. The session held at RCA Studio C featured Mike on steel guitar, Peter on acoustic 12-string organ and celeste, Mickey on electric guitar, and, as on the previous track, Davy on tambourine and Chip Douglas on bass. But who was on the drums? Well, nobody. The rhythm is provided solely by Mickey playing backbeats on the guitar and Davy on his tambourine.
Forget that girl. She'll only make you sad someday.
Forget That Girl was introduced to the group by its writer Chip Douglas in January 1967, and the recording for the album took place on March the 7th. The recording featured Mike on electric 12-string, Peter on electric piano, Mickey on drums, and Chip Taylor on bass. Douglas had done a demo of the song with the Turtles, which featured a really funky Motown-esque bass riff, similar to the one in Fontella Bass's Rescue Me. The The problem was that when the Monkees came to record in the studio, nobody could master the riff. Much to Douglas's dismay, a compromise had to be reached, resulting in a sound that was more bubblegum than he had originally intended. Although it may not sound like it, track 4, or Band 6, is Mike, Peter and Mickey's attempt at the Warner Brothers Merry Melodies cartoon theme. Peter was happy to admit that it was his idea, for which no member received royalties. You Just May Be the One is one of Mike Nesmith's finest tracks and was one of his first attempts at writing pop music. It was first recorded with the Wrecking Crew at a session produced by Nesmith on July the 18th, 1966, where 30 takes were completed. Mike's vocals were then added at a session on July the 27th. This early version appeared in 3 episodes of the TV show, but the version heard on Headquarters is a completely different recording. For that, the band returned to the studio on March the 16th, where they recorded 4 takes, this time with them playing all the instruments, resulting in one of the most solid performances of their career.
When the world and I were young.
Shades of Grey was a song written by Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil and featured Davey on lead vocals. Although they received a demo of the song, they created the arrangement themselves from scratch. Wanting to focus more on production, Chip Douglas handed over bass duties on this track to his friend Jerry Yester, who'd also been involved in production with the association. Peter was especially proud of his piano introduction, but the song was truly a team effort. The final track on side 1 of this album is Boyce & Hart's I Can't Get Her Off My Mind. Written in early 1966, the song was first recorded by its writers on July the 25th of that year. Although initially rejected by Kirshner, it was a song Davey was very fond of, and the Monkees performed it live on stage many times during shows at the end of 1966. The task of remaking the song began on March the 17th, 1967, with Mike on 12-string electric guitar, Peter on tack piano, Mickey on drums, Davey on percussion, and Jerry Yester on bass.
The Monkees, brought to you by...
If you're an entrepreneur or a creator looking to take your business to the next level, this video sponsor Squarespace has all the answers. Squarespace's collection of cutting-edge design tools, coupled with its library of professionally designed and award-winning website templates, makes building a stylish, professional-looking website easy. Once you've built your site, Squarespace Domains makes it simple to find the best name for your business, and it's all included in the price. Your site also comes with Squarespace's integrated SEO tools, so you show up more often on search engines, helping you to find more of your ideal customers. So whether you want to make money by selling custom merch, monetize your content by selling access to online video courses, generate memberships or blogs, Squarespace has all the tools you need for success. Find out more by heading to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/parlogram to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
1967.
Side 2 kicks off with Peter's signature song and one of his best compositions. Peter wrote For Pete's Sake at his house along with his friend Joey Richards. He described the song as having no real meaning and that they just pulled the words out of thin air. The song became familiar to everyone who watched the TV show, as it was played over the closing credits of Season 2.
Everyone in town knew Mr. Webster.
Written by Boyce & Hart, Mr. Webster was their answer to Eleanor Rigby. They wrote it about a bank detective at a branch of Security First National Bank in Hollywood, where they held their bank accounts. When the record was released, they even gave him a few copies, which he reportedly loved. Sunny Girlfriend was Mike's third and final composition on this album, and was tracked on February the 23rd at RCA Studio A. Recorded at the same session as the backing to The Girl I Knew Somewhere, which ended up not featuring on this album, it features Mike on electric 12-string, Peter on electric 6-string, Mickey on drums, and John London on bass.
Zilch, Mr. Davalina, Mr. Bob Davalina.
Zilch is the only track on the album credited to all four Monkees. But like the album's other wacky track, Band 6, it was mainly Peter's idea. Peter remembers that they'd all been collecting rhythmic nonsense phrases like China Clipper and Mr. Davalina, which, when all strung together, led to one of the most bizarre tracks ever.
Why don't you ask us stuff like, what time is it?
What time is it, Mike?
It's time to go, man.
The Chuck Berry-inspired No Time was developed from a jam session, which Mickey remembers as being Long Tall Sally. Written by Mickey with a little help from Mike, the track was credited on the album to their long-suffering recording engineer Hank Cicalo as a gift, one that turned out to be quite lucrative for him. Written by Diane Hildebrand and Jack Keller, the same writing team that gave us Your Auntie Griselda on More of the Monkees, Early Morning Blues and Greens was recorded in a 15-hour marathon session on March the 22nd, 1967. The original demo for the song was all in the same key, so the Monkees added a key change to its second half. Peter loved the song and felt he should have sung it, but it was Davey who got the nod. On February the 13th, 1967, Mickey was in London and in love. Tomorrow, Valentine's Day, would be a busy one. First, a fashion show at the Carlton Tower Hotel in Knightsbridge, followed by dinner with his girlfriend Samantha before leaving for Denmark. But in his room at the Grosvenor Hotel the night before, Mickey and his friend Rick Klein, whose birthday they were celebrating, decided to watch some television. Till Death Us Do Part was an infamous sitcom, which aired on the BBC from 1965 to 1975. Centred around the Garnett family in the East End of London, it starred Warren Mitchell as Alf Garnett, a reactionary, loud-mouthed, white working-class man who wasn't afraid to air his racist, anti-socialist views to anyone within earshot, which included his long-suffering wife, Else, played by Dandy Nichols. The show was later adapted for American TV as All in the Family, in which Alf and Else Garnett became Archie and Edith Bunker.
How was your day, Archie?
How does it sound like, Edith?
My day was terrific.
Whoopee.
Although Alf and Archie were both conservative-minded bigots, Alf Garnett's character and language were more violent and abrasive than Bunker's.
Go back to bed. I'll make you a nice cup of cocoa.
I don't want your bloody cocoa, rotten milky muck.
Go back to bed.
All right.
The programme also starred Anthony Booth, father-in-law of the former Prime Minister Tony Blair, as Mike, the lazy Liverpudlian husband of Alf's daughter, Rita, played by Una Stubbs. But it was a phrase used by Alf in that evening's episode entitled In Sickness and in Health, which gave Mickey the title for this album's final track.
Randy Scouse Git.
Randy Scouse Git roughly translates to American as horny Liverpudlian jerk. And whilst the phrase meant nothing to Americans, RCA in the UK were aware that it may cause offence, and at one point considered leaving it off the UK edition of the album altogether. So, needing to find the track an alternate title, they did just that. The song's lyrics were inspired by Mickey's experiences in London. They mention a girl, Samantha, who would become his first wife, and the Beatles, who were the four kings of EMI sitting stately on the floor. The comment about cutting your hair served as social commentary on the establishment's abuse of young, long-haired hippies. The Monkees first tackled the song's recording on March the 2nd at RCA Studio A, with Mike on electric 12-string, Peter on piano, Mickey on drums, and Chip Douglas on bass. Although no singles were released in the US from this album, Randy Scow's Git, now known as Alternate Title, backed with Forget That Girl, was released in the UK on May the 22nd, where it reached number 2. It was also a hit in many other European countries, and in Australia and New Zealand. Headquarters was released on May the 22nd, 1967. The album's title was Mike's idea, meaning that it had all come from their heads. The album went to number 1 on the Billboard charts, but stayed there for only 1 week, before it was replaced by the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's. The album was released on June the 24th in the UK, to coincide with their visit to the country 4 days later. It stayed in the top 3 for 3 weeks, but was denied the number 1 position by The Sound of Music and Sgt. Pepper's. After the disappointment and anger they'd felt after the release of more of the Monkees, Headquarters gave them a tremendous morale boost. As far as they could see, their future was bright. By the time this album was released, the Monkees had virtually finished recording their next album, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn and Jones Limited. That will be the subject of our next video in this series, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on that. If you want to learn more about the Monkees story, I highly recommend Andrew Sandoval's magnificent book, The Monkees Day by Day Story, a link to which is in the description. I'll be back next weekend with a look at this, which will be released as a half-speed master on March the 21st. But that's all for this one, so I'll say bye for now, and thanks for watching.